Hey guys, my name is Andy Wapplinger, and today I am turning this old iMac into a wirelessly controllable LED light using this LED controller and these LEDs. So let's get started. The first step is completely gutting the iMac of all of the components inside of it. I removed the screen, the main board, power supply, display driver, and Wi-Fi antenna. I kept most of the EMI shield because it's reflective, which will hopefully help reflect the light from the LEDs out towards the front. Then I rerouted the power cable to use later. So now that I've finished gutting the iMac, the next big thing is figuring out where and how to mount the power supply and the LED controller. I used the space on the bottom right just above the I/O ports to hold the power supply. That space was underneath the front face, so the power supply wouldn't interfere with the LEDs that are going to go where the screen was. I placed the front face on to make sure the power supply could be hidden, and when I was happy with its placement, I used some aluminum foil tape to hold it down. It's not the best solution, but the power supply hardly moves, and this iMac is just going to be sitting somewhere. I routed the power cables up to where I'm mounting the LED controller. Then I tried to desolder the power plug from the power supply, but that was taking too long, so I just cut off the plug. Then I soldered the power plug to the power supply's input cables. This isn't really necessary, but it looks good and it makes it easier to unplug the power supply later if I ever need to. I connected everything together and checked that my power supply was outputting 12 volts. Next, I took apart the LED controller's case and desoldered its power plug. Then I soldered the power supply leads to the controller to make sure it was powering on and that I could connect to it. I then wrapped the controller in electrical tape, cut away some of the EMI shield at the top, and then taped the controller where the Wi-Fi antenna used to be. The power supply and LED controller are both mounted, wired up, and working, which is awesome. And so now the next step is to mount and wire up and install the LEDs. I started by measuring the screen opening and cutting out a piece of cardboard that was about a 1/4 inch longer on each side, then gave the cardboard a quick test fit. Knowing the size of the screen opening, I measured and counted my LED strip. I had enough LEDs that I could fit 6 rows, and before I cut the strips out, I marked the wiring direction on every section so that I didn't accidentally wire a strip backwards later. Before I attached and wired up the LEDs on the cardboard, I glued down some aluminum foil to help with light reflection and maybe even some heat dissipation. Then I measured and marked down where I wanted the 6 LED strips to go, peeled off their backing, and placed them on the aluminum foil. One side effect of the glue drying on such a large surface is that it started to warp the cardboard, but because the iMac's rear shell is also rounded, the warping actually ended up being a good thing. Then came the long, annoying task of measuring, cutting, stripping, and soldering every single wire to connect the 6 strips. These strips use 4 wires, red, green, blue, and power, so this took 20 wires in total. It was not fun. I also soldered together a little wire harness that could make it easy to plug the strip into the controller when I mount it, and I reinforced it with some hot glue. I have the LEDs mounted and wired up, and so the next step is to plug them into the controller and make sure that everything is working fine. I plugged in the controller and the LEDs lit up, so I used some aluminum foil tape again to hold the cardboard in place, then figured it couldn't hurt to hot glue all of the wires and the infrared receiver at the top. It works great. So now I just need to cut the acrylic and glue it into the front so that it hides and diffuses the LEDs. I measured out the acrylic and figured that I only needed to cut down its length but not its width to save some work. I used clamps and a metal ruler to hold down the acrylic, then used a box cutter to score the acrylic several times before I snapped off the extra piece. I should have used something more rigid than a thin metal ruler because when I snapped the acrylic, it snapped along the score line on the ends but it bowed out in the middle. Thankfully, it still left me with just enough width to fully cover the front panel, but not by much. And because I didn't cut down the width, I still needed to cut out a notch for the eyesight hole, which is where the infrared receiver will go. I drilled a hole in each corner, then used a thin saw to cut it out. I used clear drying, non-expanding Gorilla Glue along the edges of the screen opening, laid down the acrylic piece with some of its protective covering removed along its edges, and carefully clamped the whole thing down with some wood to let it cure. When the glue was done curing, I removed all of the clamps and wood, then had the sweet satisfaction of peeling off the acrylic's protective covering. And finally, the front face was ready to be attached so I could finish this iMac light. During this teardown, I realized that Apple had included magnets on the side of the body to hold their old infrared remote, so I decided to reuse those magnets for the same purpose. I cut a rubberized magnet and Gorilla Glued it to the LED controller's infrared remote. The finished light works great and is exactly what I'd aimed for. I can control it using either the remote or my phone, and it's a nice, big, soft bedside light. There are just two things I'm not thrilled with: the look of the IR receiver and the light leakage through the front. At some point I might go back and improve these, but for now, I'm just going to enjoy my Wi-Fi controllable RGB iMac. I'll list the parts and tools I used for this project down in the description. If you enjoyed this project, you can hit the like button. If you have any feedback or questions, drop them in the comments below. And if you want to see any future projects, get subscribed.